to Simpler. We are three pastors, husbands, and fathers on a journey to make life simpler by holding Jesus as the core for every belief and practice. This journey has shaped us to be more like Christ, freed us from the shame of failure, and encouraged us to a deeper love of our Lord and God. We invite you to join us in the discussions that have shaped and continue to shape our lives.
I saw one of those memes where it's like it generalizes a whole population, and it said something to the effect of, "Hey, for all those people who were in metal and hardcore bands in the early 2000s, how's your Western country phase going?"
It's so true.
It cuts this dude getting ready, and he's covered in tattoos. He's pulling on boots and jeans. He just flips off the camera and walks away.
Was it Miller?
Oh, dude, that'd be awesome.
It's so
That'd be
true,
so
though,
cool.
man. And I think I saw that meme like as I was listening to Coulter Wall in the background.
That's
I don't know if I know who it
awesome.
is. And I was like, it's going pretty good.
my boys. So I grew up on my dad's old vinyl records, and a lot of that was country from like early 70s, early 80s. And so I liked Waylon Jennings, and I liked Willie Nelson, and I liked some of these old ones. And so I have a playlist with some old country on it. But as I started building out that playlist, I listened to country from like 90 to 92 as well. So I went back and
That's
found
back
a lot.
when you bought your first tall wallet.
Yeah, probably so. I went back and bought or I added to my playlist a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
And my boys were like, oh, because every time I had this playlist on. And the last few days, they've been walking through the house and they're singing some of those songs now.
That's funny.
And we saw a commercial the other day that was talking about some concert, I think in Dallas. I forget where it was, and it was listing all these country singers and like, oh, Dad, Travis Tritt. And a couple of months
Is that
ago,
Alan Jackson?
a couple of months ago, they were making fun of me, and then like Tim McGraw came on, and they're like, "Yeah, we got to go, Dad. It's Tim McGraw."
That's so funny.
Wow.
And so, what's super funny is they only listen to it when they're with me.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, the real question is, do they live like they were dying?
they sing that one. Yeah, that has a good beat to it, man. I like it. But they, what's funny is like their Christian playlist is all the Christian rappers and all the and stuff like that. And so like they know all these songs. And so their style is not anything like my very eclectic style. But now I got them singing those songs, and I'm like, what? It's just funny because they're like, Smoky Mountain rain keep falling, and I'm like, heck yeah.
That's so funny.
So
My mom had picked up Riley the other day to go to the park and hang out and stuff. So we were getting some stuff done at the house. And as I'm starting doing the dishes and hanging out, Hannah's cleaning the living room, I have Riley's songs just embedded in my head. So I start singing Let It Go just out of habit.
Nice.
As I'm going. And Hannah goes, hey, could we just, since Riley's gone, just have a break from those songs? And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're singing Let It Go. And I was like, oh.
You're the girl. You're the girl dad.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
I was like, let me just put it on my phone so that'll be
It's
good.
funny is I'll do that on purpose, but it's because I have boys and they
To
hate
mess
the
with your
song.
boys, yeah.
Yeah.
One day I snuck my Bluetooth speaker into Seth and Aiden's room while they were still sleeping and just cranked Let It Go as loud as it would
That's
go on
funny.
the Bluetooth
Funny.
speaker.
I saw a meme, speaking of Bluetooth speakers, I saw a meme the other day that was a guy had remodeled their bathroom and he installed one of those Bluetooth speaker lights that you can put in your bathrooms now. And his wife was posting a video and she said, now anytime I spend more than 2 minutes in the bathroom, I get to hear this. And it's just fart sounds just going through the Bluetooth speaker.
That's awesome.
Man.
I saw one where two college-age roommates, and they had a house that they were renting, and the guy in the whole video says, we keep all of our boxes for like if we ever have to move. And he goes, we just bought this 60-inch TV. I'm going to have my roommate put it up there. And it shows him setting it up, and he hides a Bluetooth up in the attic. And it has like this like ghostly moaning kind of sound. So he tells his roommate, he goes, hey, go throw this box up in the attic. The roommate's like, yeah, and there's a camera set up. And he brings the box up, and there's like, it's just kind of like kind of like that at first. And the guy kind of jumps and looks around a little bit. And then he plays it like really loud, and the guy like almost falls down the stairs getting away. And I love it, man. I love it so much. Awesome. I mean, I would hate it if somebody did it to me. Yeah, but it's funny to watch.
It's so funny. Yeah.
Like, remember when Josh bailed on small group one night to go watch Annabelle? We were joking about putting an Annabelle doll in his room while he was sleeping and putting a Bluetooth speaker in there.
And we need to do more Bluetooth pranks, dude. I know. It's so great.
That should be our new channel, Bluetooth pranks.
Bluetooth prank. That's right.
That's how we get famous.
Well, hey, it's another Bluetooth prank. There was a
speaking of Bluetooth,
there was a guy that worked at a mattress store. I might have already shared this story. Worked at a mattress store, and there was some brand that came out with a new mattress that had Bluetooth connectability for speakers and stuff like that. You can connect your TV to it so you can hear the speakers in your bed. And
There's
he said
so many ways.
He was like, hey, these aren't security protected. They don't need a password. He's like, please go to your nearest mattress store, connect, and just blare whatever you want to blare in the mattress store. He's like, you know how great it would be for me as an employee just hear random people's music and audio clips. And so I've been meaning to do it, but I haven't. Not to go mess with people, just go see it. Is that possible? Is it at our what's our mattress store, Mattress Plus or whatever?
I don't know.
There's a few.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go to the PCC, everybody. be on the lookout for Bluetooth pranks. So today I'm talking about more technological feats. It seems talking about Sphere in Vegas. I want to say the Sphere, but I think it's just called Sphere. Just Sphere in Vegas. And if you guys haven't seen this, I'll put some pictures.
Is it a hotel?
So it's a venue.
Oh, okay.
And I'm curious if they'll do more in there. I've only seen pictures of the inside. Venue. It's huge. So
based on what you just showed me.
Yeah. So I'll put some pictures on the screen if you're watching, and if you're not watching, you can just go Google Sphere Las Vegas and just see some of the pictures of this thing.
Pretty awesome.
So yeah, so it looks insane. It just watching like a drone pan over Vegas and you see this thing projecting Earth, projecting the moon. There was a video that somebody had taken from driving down the strip, and the Sphere was projecting an image. It just looked like a giant basketball, like a massive basketball. And it looks otherworldly, like, because your mind, we know like CGI effects, we know movie effects and things like that. So we look at something like that and I think, well, that's fake. That's not actually there, but it's
for real.
It's
right?
there. It's a real building. So I went to the website and copy and pasted a couple of stats from this. It's super interesting too. They discuss all the science behind the inside and the outside of it and how they constructed the building to be a certain way, and how the lights on the outside and the lights on the inside and all of the entertainment stuff, that comes with the inside as well, which I'll get to in a second, how they mathematically combine all of it so that if you're inside the venue, you can have a pure, unhindered, isn't that dope?
It's so cool.
16K visual experience. Yeah. So like that way, if you're at any spot, like you can see it the best that you can see it, which is crazy, right? So for the outside of it, it said that it features 580,000 square feet of LEDs, this building too, this was like $1.6 billion or something like that. It says it's a creative canvas so bold and bright that you can see it from space. And so you had joked about isn't that terrifying? You had joked about the aliens being interested in us. Well, now we can literally show them.
That's what that was from. Yeah, because I said that, and someone was like, "Well, the aliens are interested now."
Yeah, exactly. We can project whatever, and you can see it in space. And so the inside of it, I was curious what was happening at the inside. Is it just a really fancy casino? Is it a hotel? What is it? But so it's a venue. Look at this shot from the inside. Can fit 17,000 people. Those are all the people sitting down, and then it's a wraparound screen essentially.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and there's gonna be a U2 concert there this fall.
Oh my god. They're gonna
utilize all of it. So
a concert in a venue like that.
This was copy and paste.
Those tickets are gonna be so expensive.
Yeah, they were.
They were. You checked?
Yeah. So it wasn't like unbelievable expensive, but it was between around $500 to $1,000 like starting, and then go up from there.
It's less than I thought it would be.
Yeah, me too. They're doing like a planetarium type show. It's only like $50 a show.
That would be cool.
And I was like, if I want to go hang out for $50 a show and watch all that stuff.
I didn't really want to. Awesome. I didn't really want to go to Vegas again.
I've never been.
Now I kind of got the Sphere, right? Yeah. If it's $50 a show, like that's affordable to go see a different show every night of the week if you want to. Like it's not crazy.
Yeah.
Especially because it's not like you're missing out being in the balcony. You still see the exact same screen like happening. If it's a concert, different story, but.
I would like to see a concert in there.
It'd be so dope. Also the website says, did you know you can fit the entire Statue of Liberty inside the Sphere? Volume of a sphere was used to calculate the interior square footage of the venue and maximize the size of its immersive technologies. From our 160,000 square feet LED media plane, that's 4 times football field. So 4 football fields are wrapping around you in there, which is insane.
Wow.
And 17,385 seats inside the bowl, the viewing experience. And it says that there's also immersive effects that ignite your senses through haptic vibrations in your chairs, speakers built into your chairs, and changing temperatures and flowing
I've
winds.
been talking about that forever. Like how awesome it would be when you're watching a movie to like actually feel a little bit like
feel it, yeah.
Which I thought they were trying to do with the Apple Glass.
Yeah.
But this is better.
Yeah. So like, which is crazy too, because you're getting that viewing experience seemingly from any seat in the place. And so
that's crazy.
You buy a $50 seat as opposed to a $500 seat. You're still getting that type of visual experience.
I'd like to watch the first Jurassic Park in there.
Dude. Oh man. Now I'm sad that I'm not there, watching the first Jurassic Park, but they talk about,
I'd like to drive my 1994 Jeep Wrangler to Vegas and watch the first Jurassic Park in there.
Drive it into the Sphere Park and then watch it. And they talked too about the science of like how they can quickly change temperatures. So that one of the things they had talked about was like, I don't know if they have a show coming up, but they want, if a blizzard pops up on the screen, they want the people to feel like they're in the blizzard. So like shifting temperatures that quickly, having things flow throughout the entire space that quickly, which is a massive space. And so just the reason why I bring it up for the PCC was here we're in July or August now of 2023. And there's been 2 technological advances or 2 technological things that have happened this year that have like truly taken my breath away. Like looking at like, this is what we can do now. Like how, of course, things have been building up with this type of technology. Whenever LEDs were first becoming popular, I bet a lot of people saw the potential of what we could do with this type of technology, where these lights aren't dependent upon or don't affect the temperature as much or can last a long time. Like there's people that saw the potential, but now we're actually reaching that potential, if that makes sense. And I know that we're just touching the surface in regards to the entertainment implications for things like Sphere, for the cultural and social implications for things like Vision Pro. Like I'm so excited that it's happening now, that we get to see so much of these things unfold, and that we get to go see a show in Vegas at some point, hopefully. Like go catch a concert, or if they show Jurassic Park, I'm on a plane tomorrow. Like we're going to see Jurassic Park at Sphere.
I'm in.
So yeah, I love it.
Maybe that'll make the LED screens cheaper by the time we finish the building.
I know, right? And there we go. We're set. Or let's just build this as a building, Let's just build Sphere St. Angelo.
Can you imagine doing a worship service in there?
It'd be insane.
It would be like, there would be a lot of people that would hate it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people that would hate it. I would kind of like it.
That'd be pretty cool, man. It's an experience.
Except for, can you imagine the amount of problems? Like you have a screen go out, or one thing goes out,
it's like,
messes up everything.
I think it'd be cool to even do like a sermon where like you're talking, like what if you're like walking through like
the creation,
glory of God revealed, and then you just like see
That's so sick. Yeah.
And you like hear little bird chirps and you feel, what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It'd be an experience.
It'd be so cool, man.
I wanted to make a video on the glory of God in 1999, I think it was. And I went to some people that I knew. I lived in Lubbock at the time, went to some people I knew there that had a video company. We talked through it. At that point, there weren't as many digital things that you could buy and digital resources that you could buy to create this video. And so we were going to have to do it all on our own, and renting helicopters and all that kind of stuff. And I actually priced it all out back in 1999 for this video I wanted to make.
It's a lot cheaper now.
Oh yeah, it'd be super. Yeah. It'd be way easier today.
You got this, Colin.
Yeah, that's right. Dope. Well, hey, I'm excited about this. I'm excited for where we go next with entertainment technology and stuff.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, we're not talking about that today, Ryan. What are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about Jurassic Park.
We did talk about it. We're talking about Jurassic Park for the next hour. We're set.
Jurassic Park and how it points to Jesus.
There we go.
No, today we are going to talk. This is another topic that was suggested to us by a woman who used to live in Angelo, doesn't anymore, a friend of Hannah Scholl's. And her name is Shelby. And Shelby says, hey, talk to us about dating. Like, what does it look like, especially if you're parents, if you're a parent of a teenager who's kind of entering that age. But I also know that we have a lot of single listeners, people who are college age, or maybe found themselves single and later in life for some reason or other. And what does it look like for a believer to date? How do we handle that?
But Ryan, Haven't we kissed dating goodbye?
Well, actually, Pierce, the guy who wrote that book, and it was incredibly popular.
Yeah.
Because when I was in college, it was like, it kind of became the next thing. And a lot of people were like, no, it's all about courtship, and it's all about this, and it's all about group dates, and you got to have the people over to your families. Just the guy who wrote that and believed that very sincerely now doesn't believe in Jesus at all. And so take that for what you will. I know some people are, some people are like, yeah, but courtship's still okay. So here's the thing. Courtship, dating, none of that is modeled for us in the scripture. So there is not a biblical model for dating. I know that there are people who will still argue, and I don't mean it that they're argumentative. I mean, they will make a case for biblical dating. Yeah. I don't see that model anywhere in the scripture. And I'm completely open to the idea if there's something we're missing, like if there's a text that we're missing, but I don't think it's there.
Now, you can say that, but there's too many awkward texts that would make that conversation difficult. Yeah. Like just the book of Song of Solomon will make that conversation very, very difficult.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we do when we talk about dating, I'll tell you this, that Michelle and I, when we knew we wanted to have kids, so this is 15 years ago now, when we were ready to start having kids.
This is after you're married?
Yes. Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
This is an episode on dating. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page.
No, we didn't want to wait long to have kids because we were both older when we got married. But one of the things we talked about is that like I had always felt like dating, the intent of dating was moving towards marriage, that was the purpose of dating from a cultural perspective. And I don't know that that's entirely true across the board, but I think that a lot of people feel that is probably the case. I think some people probably date to date. They enjoy dating and socializing or whatever. But from the Christian perspective, at least in the late 90s, early 2000s, what we talked about was dating has as its aim eventually being married. And so I said, I don't want our kids to date until they're old enough to at least consider being married at some point, in that process. And as our boys got older, because we have 2 boys now, one of the things that dawned on me is like, because this is something that the 3 of us say to each other a lot, and Micah has been a thorn in my side for 21 years, and he'll say these kinds of things, and I appreciate it, but Micah will be like, okay, we'll make a biblical case for it. And so at some point when Michelle and I were talking about it, I realized I don't actually have a biblical case for preventing my boys from dating. And so what Michelle and I talked about, when our aim switched from preventing our boys from dating, and neither of them have been interested in that at this point. Our oldest is only 14, but our aim as parents and our goal was to, instead of preventing our boys from dating, was to shape how to date and how to honor Jesus. And that there is an aim in this, that there's another person involved for whom Christ died. And how do we treat people for whom Christ died? How do we honor people? How do we care for people? And I think just because most of my dating experiences were really negative, there was one girl that I dated that it was, from the beginning to end, was a positive experience. I mean, she was a really neat, godly girl. We had a relationship.
Michelle?
Sorry, let me say that differently. There was one experience that didn't result in marriage.
Yeah, gotcha.
But all of my other dating relationships prior to Michelle had some sort of negativity in them. Like there was just something that wasn't good about them. But there was one girl that I dated when I was like 24, 25, that we had a good time. We enjoyed each other's company. We had a lot of Christian friends. We both were making our aim Jesus at this point in our lives. And so like there was a lot of good about it. And so I do think that a dating experience can be a positive experience. It doesn't have to be. I think a lot of Christian parents were worried about, what if my kid has sex? What if my kid does this? And I think we're always worried about the negative. I don't think that the negative...
You can have sex without dating.
Yeah. I don't think that the negative is the reason to not date. I think what we do is we shape people's mindsets.
Can we set a premise?
Yeah, go.
First, I think it's important in this conversation is to set the premise that there is no biblical model for this kind of relationship.
No.
If you're going to try to pull principles, be cautious that you're not pulling out cultural principles. So, for example, the Jewish system, there was no dating. It was a betrothal, which was basically like a arranged marriage to some degree. And then I say to some degree because there's situations like Ruth, not Ruth,
Esther.
No. Well, Esther, and then actually Naomi. But anyways, like Like there's situations where it's not like I was a parent.
You're thinking of Ruth,
yeah,
like Ruth and Boaz.
Yeah. So it's not every time. But
it was sort of arranged. Still,
it was part of the system, the cultural system. But so like we wouldn't take as Americans, we wouldn't take a Jewish system of cultural arranged marriages and adopt it. So you got to be careful. You know what I mean? You wouldn't take
100%.
You wouldn't take the principles from an arranged marriage culture and say let's apply things. Yeah, right. So it's not universal. Like obviously there's still cultures that still do things that way. Sure. So I think a premise is that this isn't a model in the scripture, and be cautious if you're going to try to like apply biblical examples of dating
for sure.
to model dating or any kind of relationship that is pre-marriage. Be careful in like using examples from the scripture as like a principle, because I think you could have some faults in that. So I think if we're going to lay a positive premise to the conversation, it's that our feeling, I'll say it that way because this is a little more of a this is our opinion piece. Yeah. Our feeling about dating or any kind of relationship prior to marriage is that as a believer, the goal needs to be in a marriage that proclaims the relationship that Jesus has with the church, or to proclaim the glory of God, or proclaim the gospel of Jesus through your marriage. So any relationship you have prior to that, the question I would ask is, if that's not the goal, if the goal isn't to end up in that marriage, as far as like a romantic relationship, if the goal isn't that marriage, why are you in it? Yeah, as a believer.
As a believer, yeah. So not what I mentioned earlier is that there are probably reasons outside of the Christian purview that people would just date without having marriage in mind. But
yeah, which I think is actually the cultural nuance. So like a lot of people in our culture here in the U.S. would say we're not dating for marriage; we're dating because this is what you do.
Yeah. And so as a believer, the aim has to be, we have to remember that marriage has as its intent a proclamation, like Micah said, of the gospel and how Christ relates to the church. And if you can't, in a romantic relationship as a believer, have that in mind, if that's not in the forefront of, and I'm not going to just say your mind, but in both of your minds, like if you say, man, my aim is to make much of Jesus in this, but the person you're interested in, their aim is not, that's already dangerous. Now, right now, some of you listening are going, oh yeah, because we're not supposed to be unequally yoked, 2 Corinthians. Please quit using that as it relates to marriage, okay? 2 Corinthians is talking about false teachers, and Paul is ripping the Corinthians apart for believing false teachers. And he's saying that those, anyway, it doesn't matter. It's not about marriage. So it's important to have similar types of goals. I don't think you have to be similar types of people. Michelle and I are very different people, but our goal is the same, and that is the aim of Christ, that there is an aim of Jesus. I mean, I remember when Hannah Pierce, your wife, first came as a college student to Angelo, and Michelle and I were trying to invest in college students a little bit more. We had been asking our small group to invest in some of the college students a little bit more. And so we invited Hannah, and I don't remember who the other two people were over for dinner. And Hannah ended up coming over every week for like a little over a year. And she came over every week and would have dinner with us and watch a show with us. And we liked her so much. I was like, man, it'd be great if she and Pierce got together. And then there was a little while that I thought it was going to happen.
No, you said they wouldn't get together because Hannah would never marry someone that smoked.
So
verbatim.
Yeah. So there came.
Look at me now.
I know, man. You've gotten her pregnant twice. So I had hoped that, and then like the longer time went on, I was like, no, it's not going to happen. She's a nurse. She's, like I just thought it's not going to work. And then when you guys got together, I was so stinking excited. But like it was interesting because to my point, like, Michelle and I are very different. I think that you and Hannah have a lot of differences. You and Cammie, Micah have a lot of differences. But in each of our marriages, I think we would all say that our aim with our spouses is the same. And that's Jesus, the proclamation of Jesus. Yeah. And so if you're going to date, focus less on the nuances of personality that might make you different, and focus more on what you have in common in Christ.
What you're actually saying is like if you're gonna date, look for someone who shares that value,
the value of Christ.
And I actually don't actually have an issue with dating somebody that you think has that same value, that same goal of honoring Jesus with your life, and then you figure out like, you know what, I actually don't really enjoy this person that much. Like,
absolutely,
we're vastly different in these areas. Even though we share the same value, it's not going to work. Or as an example, someone when I was in college, one of my peers told you at a coffee shop one time, he was engaged to this girl, and he was like, I'm not actually that attracted to her, but like, she's.
Well, yeah.
What did he say? Like she's available or something? Well,
no,
like
he said that I've realized that I have to change my perspective on that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we would say don't settle for somebody that has a godly outlook who shares the same value of Christ with you if you're not attracted to them and if you're not interested in them.
Right.
Like the aim is that you're going to be with them for a really long time. Yeah. So if you find them boring, that's going to be problematic.
Yeah.
Like we recently, last month, we were visiting my mom and her husband in Seguin over the 4th of July, and we'd been fishing and we'd been paddleboarding and doing all this stuff. And one evening we were kind of tired, and Michelle and I were playing Rummikub. We were just sitting at the table waiting for dinner, and I think it was the night my sister was cooking. And anyway, Michelle and I are just laughing, like hysterically, like being goofy. And then the next night we're playing some games with the rest of the family, and my mom's husband, Greg, great dude. He was like, man, you guys were cracking up last night. And I was like, yeah, like we laugh a lot. Like we enjoy one another, but it's not the little things that we enjoy about each other that were the basis of our relationship. Yeah. They have become a big part of our relationship, and they're a super sweet part of our relationship. But I wouldn't have married Michelle if I didn't enjoy her and didn't delight in her. But
that'd be dumb.
But those things can't be the priority. And so whether you're a teenager, whether you're a college student, whether you're divorced and you're wanting to date again, what I would say is that it's imperative that the overlap be in your value of Christ and the gospel. But as Micah said, and I'm so glad you said this, that can't be the sole basis for doing life with someone. It does need to be the foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, there needs to be some enjoyment. You actually have to like the person.
Give you another thought. I'm just going to like spit off random things.
Good.
Yeah. I'm not convinced. I don't even think this is the case that God has one particular person picked out for you.
Oh, I agree with that.
And I'm not saying that it couldn't be the case situationally. What I'm saying is I don't see anything in the scripture that says like, let me tell you why I'm saying that. All I ever heard in college was I'm praying that God will show me who the girl is.
The one
or the guy is that he has picked out for me. And then they would start dating and they would be like, I'm not sure if you're the one that God has picked out for me. And I'm like, this is.
Grow some nuts and just say, look, I don't like you.
Why are you putting this on God? Right. I'm just saying like, I'm not saying. My point, I'm not saying situationally that God couldn't like say, I'm putting these two people together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All I'm saying is I don't see anything in the text, in the scriptures anywhere that says as far as relationships go, minus like a few situations, Adam and Eve being one, where it's from the guy, you know what I mean? But like, I don't see any examples of it being that way. I mean, I think there's examples of how God formulated the plan of the line of Jesus in a specific way.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't, like, you don't see that anywhere else without a purpose. So like, I am not convinced. I'll say it this way. I think it would be unwise if you're dating to have the perspective that God's got one person picked out for me and I'm waiting for that person. Instead of saying what I can know is here's God's design for marriage as a believer. My goal is to be in that kind of relationship. So I'm going to look for someone that I can do life with that shares that value, that I enjoy, that I love, that I'm attracted to, that has that value, that foundational value, that we can do life together like that. That seems like a safer place to be because you know those things to be true versus like, I think God's got one person picked out. Plus there's a lot of problems with that. Like, what are you saying then if that's the case, if God has one person picked out for you, right? And then you get married and realize, I just made a covenant with this person between us and God. And
I don't enjoy him.
I don't enjoy him. Like, does that mean you screwed up now?
Or did God screw up?
Or did God screw up? Or like, there's just too many problems.
Well, and the other thing too, like just from a wisdom perspective, I think you're right. I think we put, I don't know, it's almost superstition. Like where you're just kind of like, you know, God has this one for me and I'm waiting for the one, and you're looking for all these signs and all these signals. I'll say it this way. I used to joke about it when I was, because I met Michelle on my 31st birthday, but I used to joke about it and say, look, there are 6 billion people in the world at this point, and let's say half of them are women. That's 3 billion. Let's say that out of the 3 billion, you know, only 500 million of them are my age range of dating, right? And then out of those 500 million, there's only like 10 million that I'm ever going to meet, you know, or come across possibly. Yeah. Anyway, I whittled it all the way down and I was like, there's only like 7 that are my age that love Jesus, that want a guy with a hairy chest. You know, I was like, there's 7 women in the world. But what's interesting is people have all these superstitions and all these kinds of, I don't know, like, I don't know. It's really weird how people date and have all these made up subjective kind of standards.
I'll tell you, another one of my concerns with that idea of like the superstitious perspective of a relationship of like, is this the one? Yeah. I think what happens, we've seen this in counseling. They may not have said it this way, this bluntly, but like we're doing counseling with them after they're married because they're struggling. And in their minds, they're like, did I actually marry the right one? They're like, did I make a mistake? And so if your superstitious perspective is God's got one picked out for you, you get married and then realize there's something off, your question in your mind is this the right one? And you're only looking for an escape. Flip that. If your perspective isn't that God has one person picked out for me, but that my goal is to have a marriage that reflects Jesus, then even if there's bumps in the road in the relationship, it doesn't shift your value.
No,
But I think if your perspective is God's got one person picked out, I don't think you're actually relying on the value that the scripture gives for marriage. You're relying on a perspective that's not actually in the Bible, which means then your confidence isn't resting in something that's true. It's resting in something that might not be true.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think too that like, I don't think people take red flags in dating seriously enough. I think that...
Is that like the Brazilian steakhouse thing?
Yeah.
Lift the flag when you
exactly this.
Oh, my bad.
I think that people, I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard people say, well, it'll be different when we get married. It'll be better when we get married.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're in a situation now...
It's usually women.
Who are the red flags?
No. Usually, I've heard more women say, it's usually it'll be different.
It's usually women who believe that the men will be different when they get married.
At least in our experience, what we've heard more often than not.
Well, because if we're being quite honest, more often than not, the women are in a place where they're a little more mature, a little more ready to settle down. The guys are kind of being assholes. And they're like, yeah, but it'll change. And can I just tell you, like, probably it won't. Yeah. So
for a very, very long time, it won't.
Yeah. And so at the very least, you're setting out to make marriage very hard. And the loss of a dating relationship that you've been in for a couple of years is costly because there's an emotional investment.
Yeah.
But the loss of a marriage that you've been in for a couple of years comes with so many different kinds of weighty things that better to walk away from a dating relationship that isn't proclaiming Jesus, that isn't enjoyable and a blessing.
Yeah, so even if it's not like it's a bad relationship, but even if you realize like this isn't the person I want to marry.
If it's not a blessing, right? So let's assume that both of you have the aim to proclaim Christ, but it's not an encouragement to you. It's not a delight to you. It is going to be easier. Hard still, but easier to walk away from a dating relationship than it will be a marriage relationship, because by the time you bring other circumstances and stuff into it and you combine your finances and you have kids together, I'm just saying divorce is way messier than breakup. And I think a lot of people think marriage fixes those problems. And we turn a blind eye to it. I'll say this too. I do not believe that a sexual relationship prior to marriage is God's design. And I will tell you that a sexual relationship between a romantic couple prior to marriage makes it more difficult to see clearly what you ought to do. Because a sexual relationship creates a bond. It just does. You can't deny it. You can't say that it doesn't. A sexual relationship creates some sort of a bond, and it creates an intimacy, and in some cases a false intimacy. Like I've met people through 30 years of ministry who began a sexual relationship a week into dating, you know, and they assumed that they loved each other. And then when they're looking back on their relationship, they're like, man, we've had trouble since day one, but they assumed love because sex was part of the equation. And so I would much rather see a sexual relationship blossom in a marriage relationship where love has already been established, and then see that sexual relationship grow, rather than to have the sexual relationship be the thing that fabricates a false love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally is a fact. Well, it's a real emotion that is total fabricating love. I was going to say, I think that you mentioned this earlier, I think, Ryan, that a lot of times parents are uncomfortable dating because they're afraid that their kids are going to have sex.
Right.
Valid concern.
Yeah.
Here's the fix. Not the fix for your kids having sex, but the fix for the worry. The fix for the worry is to give your kids a biblical perspective of marriage, which included in that is sex and God's design for sex. And his purpose of sex from its inception was to paint this picture of his relationship with his people. So when you put sex in the right viewpoint for your kids, then it allows them to see the benefit of it in the design that God has. I did not grow up with that. My parents are amazing, godly people. I did not grow up with the correct perspective of sex.
Well, that's because you and I grew up in a generation where what we were taught was sex is sin.
Yes. And so it was, the whole goal was abstinence.
Right.
I wore a True Love weights ring up until college.
You make fun of me for the pins I don't wear on my collar, but
well, okay, wait. Let's just be clear.
Making fun of you now.
Let's just be clear. You can make fun of me all you want, but like when DC Talk wears the rings, you know what I mean? Like when you've got like, there's a difference between cool Christians and Christians that wear those pins. That
I was not a cool Christian for sure.
So you can make fun
Let's
of me.
just say I was cool, right? And you weren't.
Listen, all we have to do is compare pictures of Micah at 16 to Ryan at 16.
You know who the cool kid was.
We are 100% certain that I was not the cool kid.
If I'm being honest, though, and this is what is so frustrating for me. I mean, this is different than the see. Okay, actually, I think there was some comparison with those. You actually had a heart for evangelism.
I did, yeah.
And that was the reason for that. I actually had a heart to honor God, and how I was taught that was
it was misshaped,
abstinence.
Yes.
And what it's an incorrect perspective. I'm not saying not having sex is the bad perspective. What I'm saying is the idea of abstinence I was taught was just don't have sex because it's wrong.
Yeah.
And make that your it was a law perspective saying don't break the law because then God's not pleased with you. So I wore a ring on my finger to remind myself that I was not supposed to have sex until I got married. That's a misshaped perspective.
Yes, it is.
It's terrible. It's awful, and I hate it.
Well,
because it didn't do anybody any good.
It doesn't.
It didn't do anybody good to read that stupid book I Kissed Dating Goodbye because it wasn't from a correct biblical perspective.
No,
I read it.
Did you? I never did.
And it was what I was never taught growing up.
Cool now.
I know. All of us that read that book. All of us that read that. Well, you know what's funny? We were talking about this earlier. Like a lot of the people now who deconstruct, supposedly deconstruct, are people from like
that generation,
my generation who had those struggles. I read that book and now he doesn't believe in Jesus or the other stuff. But I think that what I was never taught was that sex is something beautiful.
Right. I was going to get us to that point.
Positive. This is the benefit. If you teach your kids this is this glorious.
Sex was created by God prior to the fall. So we can't start by saying sex is sinful because it was created prior to sin.
It's never stated that it's sinful.
Right. But like everything else, worship was.
That's a great point.
Worship was created by God.
Well, and we don't say that worship is sinful.
We don't say that worship is sinful.
We say that worshiping something else is sinful.
We say that worshiping contrary to the way that God has designed it is the problem.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're
worshiping something else.
Something else, yeah. And so that's how we have to talk about sex. So if we would teach our kids that sex is holy and that it was designed with a purpose, like worship is holy and was designed with a purpose.
And maybe I'll say this, total opinion, you guys kick back if you need to.
I will.
I'm not sure I would use, you can fight that one all you want, dude. Just show the picture.
I know that I was not cool.
So I'm not sure in our culture most people still understand the concept of holy, like biblical. So I'm not sure I would use that term, although you're right, it is. When I'm talking to a teenager, I'm not sure I'm going to tell them sex is holy, treated as holy, because
good. So what's the language?
I don't think they understand. Most people still think of it in terms of holiness as obedience to a law.
Okay.
So I think what I would say to them is sex is this beautiful picture that God has set up before the fall of his intimacy with his people. And what he allows to happen in a marriage relationship is for you to paint the picture of God's intimacy with his people. And when sex happens inside a marriage relationship between two people who've put their faith in God as Savior, then you get to enjoy this like undescribable blessing of pleasure and joy because you are engaging in essence the same kind of intimacy that God has with his people. When you paint it in that picture, what you're not saying is treat it in this way that is special so that you can avoid treating it in a way that's unspecial. What I'm saying is like I don't tell my kids like don't have sex.
Right.
I don't say don't smoke weed. Don't cuss. don't do this and don't do this. What I'd rather do is give them a perspective of your goal is to honor Jesus in everything you do. So now let's talk about it situationally. Yeah, I think a lot of parents approach sex from that perspective of like, don't do it. Instead of saying, listen, guard it. Maybe that's the word I was looking for. Guard it because done in a way that is outside of God's design is something that will bring it will bring shame,
heartache,
it will bring heartache,
misrepresents
it will bring
Jesus.
Yep.
Like,
and I think actually, you know what? It's funny. We talked about this not too long ago on a podcast. I think this is a very apt description that Proverbs gives. This woman of adultery is like alluring, and she seems to have honey. And there's a sense of like, even
She's
though I know that
you.
it's like it's an allegory for sin, other things. I think there's an essence where that's true. Even and you can see that in sex. Like there is pleasure in sex.
Yeah.
No matter what situation it's in, maybe excluding like rape and things like that, but like in a sexual relationship,
in a romantic relationship,
there is pleasure that happens in sex. But when it's done in a way that is not God's design, it will only produce wormwood. It will only produce bitterness and shame and guilt and sorrow and heartache and all those things. But instead of saying to my kids, don't do it because you don't want to live in that, what I'm saying is I'll tell them, like, guard sex because it is the most beautiful, enjoyable picture that you can.
And the problem with avoid it is people like you and I growing up, you wearing the True Love Waits ring, being cool. You are not learning a godly perspective. You're learning abstinence. And people can abstain from those things. But here's the thing that I've run into. There are a lot of people from our generation who get married and then don't know how to have a healthy sexual relationship in marriage because they were taught it was wrong their whole life.
Yeah. And they still think it's wrong.
And so now they still have shame connected to it because they were taught the wrong perspective.
Yeah, maybe that's a good point, is like, as parents, if we teach it from that perspective, we're actually connecting shame to something that shouldn't have shame.
Yeah, that's a blessing.
And to your point earlier, which I think is genius, I've never thought about before, we don't do that with worship.
We don't.
Yeah.
So like, why would you like ingrain in your kids, don't worship other gods, don't worship other gods, don't worship other gods? And then when they come to worship, they're like,
wait, how do I worship?
Wait, how am I supposed to do this? Because all I know is not to worship other gods. I mean, that's kind of extreme, but that's exactly
I don't think it is extreme. I think that's a great,
it's an extreme example that none of us probably here in the U.S. are like teaching our kids, like, don't worship other gods. Don't worship other gods.
So dating, we got off on sex, which I think is an important part of it.
I think it's part of it,
I think it's a big part of it. I really do. Like, I mean.
Sorry. Sex isn't a big part of dating.
It's a big part of the conversation because the way the world views dating is sexual relationships.
Yeah, because Christian parents, at least in the 90s, their feeling was if you're holding hands, you're probably having sex. I mean, really, right?
No.
Like that was you weren't born then, so you don't know. But like
in the 90s,
he was born in 90,
not in the early 90s.
I was born in 1990. That's the earliest you can get, man.
Yeah, but like you're a baby.
My sister was born on January
I was holding somebody's hand as a toddler, and they were like, "What's going on here?
What's happening on the playground?"
You got kicked out of Mom's Day Out?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, yeah, you're right. So you were born in 90. I forget that. I don't know.
What he's saying, Pierce, is you didn't grow up
I know
in
what
the
you
90s.
mean.
Yeah, you didn't grow up with that standard.
I wasn't a teenager in the 90s hearing these teachings and hearing these things.
Right. So, and I was
leading worship for your kids' games.
I was dating in the 90s, like I was dating in the 90s. And then like what I was taught basically was if you're holding hands, if you're kissing goodnight, which is why I Kiss Dating Goodbye was kind of written. And I think it was written in part. I didn't read it. So all I can speak to is all of my friends who read it and what shifted in their behavior.
Yeah.
And it seems that the primary guard of it was to guard sexual perversion or yourself from sexual, situations and put yourself in group situations where sex isn't a possibility. It seems like a lot of it was how to safeguard against sex.
What's funny is there was actually some really good practical ideas.
Oh, I'm sure there were. It
was just from the wrong foundational perspective.
Yeah. And it didn't work.
Like I'm a huge fan of if you're dating somebody and developing a relationship, you should, I'm saying this is my opinion, but strong opinion, you should hang out with other people.
Well, it gives you a lot of insight into how those people act.
Social environments. And you do not want to create an environment where you are an island as a couple. Because I'll tell you why I feel so strongly about it. Because there's nothing in the New Testament that says anybody in the body of Christ functions as an island, even a couple. So like if your whole premise of dating is we just hang out together, we're just going to get together and watch movies together, I'm not even like this conversation is not even about the sexual temptation. I'm just talking about like the relationship. How you socialize. Yeah, it's not healthy.
Well, it's interesting. I forget what it was a meme or something, but this guy was talking about like when they're looking at hiring somebody at their company, one of the things that they'll do is they'll take them to lunch a couple of times to see how they treat the wait staff.
Oh yeah.
Because they're like, we don't want to hire people who are butts, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not a bad idea. Like, be in social settings with the people that you are interested in dating and see how they treat other people and see how they interact. And
so I guess we're actually saying we don't really have a stance on dating, but if you're dating, I think there's some practical things.
There's some benefit.
Practical things you could do as a lead up towards a godly biblical marriage.
What we're saying is it's important to probably know well this person that you're going
Which I don't think, I'll say this.
Although Michelle and I were looking at rings within 2 weeks.
I was about to say, I don't think you have to date to get to that point.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think you could be friends in a social environment and realize in that social environment, like, gosh, this is the person I want to marry.
Yeah.
And similar to what you and Michelle did, I think then you could like begin a relationship, call it dating, call it whatever, and know like this is the person I want to marry.
Yeah, we knew really quickly. We were strangers that within 1 week of messaging back and forth and then 2 weeks of dating, we knew we wanted to be married, and we've been together 17 years, and it's been a blessing.
I will say this, just random things popping in my head. I'm not a fan of long dating relationships.
Me either.
Oh, so like, I think that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
I have very, very, very strong opinion.
And I feel long engagements are even worse.
Yes, 100%. So that's why I actually don't, like with my boys, the conversation we've had is like, if you're not ready to get married right now, this is totally my thing. As my parent, I'm not making a rule. I'm telling my boys, Kami and I are.
There's some wisdom behind it.
If you're not ready to get married right now, don't date.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's any benefit in a long dating relationship that is not intended to go towards marriage. And here's what I mean. Let me qualify. A very serious dating relationship.
Sure.
I don't necessarily have an issue with you're like, hey, we like each other and we're going to like.
We're hanging out with our friends. We all go to the movie together. We're all swimming at the lake.
What I mean is like I'll say this, probably when you're after high school, some people start this before they graduate high school, but when you're at 17 up, the likelihood is that when you start dating somebody, there's a sense where you want to be married to that person, and you're going to begin your relationship shifting towards where you're trying to act like you're married, whether you know it or not. Like there are parts of your relationship that will head that way.
Sure.
So as a parent, I want to be conscious of that.
Yeah.
I want to be conscious of the wisdom I can instill in my kids. Like, hey, this is not the way that you need to have that relationship.
The desires that somebody has for physical closeness to somebody else, and I'm not even talking about sex, but everything that precedes that is a good desire. And it's a natural desire, like those desires, but we take those desires and we shape them and conform them to Christ. So one of the things you touched on earlier, Micah, that I want to just expand on just a little bit, you said that this is about the gospel and about representing Christ and his bride. So really, really quickly, the biblical picture of marriage is that marriage was created to tell the story of Christ in the church, the relationship of Christ in the church.
New Testament.
We know that Matthew 22 says that you're neither married nor given in marriage in heaven. An earthly marriage does not survive death or the return of Christ. When you enter into heaven, you're not married or given in marriage. An earthly marriage is meant for the husband, Ephesians 5, to represent Christ, who loved the church and died for those who would put faith in him, and for the bride to represent the church that desires and longs for Christ, the husband, to return. Come, Lord Jesus, come. And that an earthly marriage is built and intended to correctly represent Jesus and the church. And so the intimacy in the Old Testament, we see God using sexual language to describe his closeness that he desires with Israel. We see in 1 Corinthians 6 sexual language used to dialogue about the people of faith who have joined themselves to Christ. And so what you were saying earlier, Micah, is that the sexual relationship between a husband and a wife, those who have put their faith and their trust in Jesus for salvation, is a telling of the closeness that God has with his people. Back in Genesis 2, it says that Adam and Eve were naked and felt no shame. And there's this idea that a husband and wife should be able to be together naked. Here's everything about me. Here's who I am. You see me as I truly am, and I am not ashamed or embarrassed. And those who have put faith in Christ should be able to come before Christ. Romans 8:1, there's no condemnation. We're unashamed before Christ. And so the dating relationship is a cultural construct. It's not a biblical model, and it is a cultural construct that we do use in the West and a lot of people use around the world. But as believers, we have to understand the trajectory of it. And it is building towards and heading towards marriage. And marriage has as its core the telling of the story of Jesus. And so that's how we treat dating. Like I am doing this with the intent of moving towards a situation where myself and this other person can come together and tell the story of Christ.
And I think as a parent, that's where you have to push your kids.
Absolutely.
If you want to talk about, I think there's situational wisdom per kid.
Every kid's going to be different.
That's what
you have 4 boys who will probably all handle this very differently.
Drastically, which I think you have to have the wisdom situationally as a parent to deal with it. But if the overarching goal is to push your kids towards a relationship, in my case, my boys towards a relationship with a woman where they can do that picture, the marriage picture from the scriptures, that's got to be the goal, period. As a parent, I think a lot of parents screw this up. They don't want to deal with it. It's hard. It's hard to, I'm saying that now as I have teenage boys. Like it's a hard conversation to navigate because there's a sense where like you need to give your kids some freedom and there's a sense where you need to guard them. You know what I mean? Like
most of the time as parents, when we talk about dating, we talk about sin avoidance instead of gospel proclamation.
I'll say this, if you're at a place as a parent where you are concerned about your kid's ability to guard sex, I would say like set up some boundaries for them, but explain why. Don't just don't just be like, well, I can't do anything about it. They're just going to have to be their decision. Like that's terrible parenting. That's terrible parenting.
Yeah, you can still guard them with the correct context.
Yes.
With the correct understanding.
You could, I would have no problem saying, listen, you can't keep it in your pants, seems like. You know, like you seem to me like you're going to have a struggle with this. I don't think it's a good idea for you to date. And so here's why. Here's a picture. Because that's a character issue. So now let's walk through, you know, like character building with your kids, setting their perspective on Jesus, like doing what it takes to help them have a heart that's for Jesus. That's what I mean. Like parenting isn't, I hate the idea that parents think that parenting is just trying to like get your kids out of the house like healthy and safe so they can go live their life. Like you have the opportunity now to shape your kids in a way where they can live the rest of their life for the glory of Jesus, and you're wasting it because you're worried about hurting their feelings or them not liking you, or it's just like we need to do an episode probably on parenting specifically on some of these things. But like
we've done parenting fairly recently, but yes.
Oh, we have?
We did. We've done 2 episodes on parenting.
Oh, never mind. Then
I'm curious. I mean,
maybe
I'm
more
curious.
specific.
Yeah, I'm curious if we did.
I mean, January 24th. It's been 6 months.
It's been 6 months. Well, I mean, we said that we're probably gonna do that once a year, but I think that you're right. From a very pointed perspective, maybe it's just parenting teens, like something like that. The way the world sees that specifically.
I'll give you another one. This is like digging into the trenches a little bit, but like there have been more of the teenage generation right now, which I don't know what generation is that.
It's a blend of Gen Z and Alpha. Alpha's coming up.
There have been more kids that age who have come out and said they're trans than ever before.
Nearly 20%.
I'm not convinced that number's true, and I'm not convinced, even though there are more, I'm not convinced that it's because that something is different now, or like they're enlightened. I think it's because they've been faced with social media and any kind of entertainment that just puts it in your face. Like if you have any kind of weird struggle, you're trans. Like I heard Jordan Peterson say one time that every girl that goes through puberty, what did he say? Has what's it called when you like struggle with your own gender identity?
Dysmorphia.
Body dysmorphia. He said every girl that goes through puberty has body dysmorphia to some degree, and he talked about why that is. So now you're taking young women who go through this normal hormonal change, and everybody's saying, well, the feelings you're feeling means that you're actually not in the right body. So like there's all this stuff around. So now, you know what I hear from parents is, I'm just trying to make sure my kid's not gay or trans. Like that's as bad as in the 90s saying don't have sex. You know what I mean? Like it's like, if the goal is to keep your kid from doing something wrong, it's too small of a goal. You're not actually helping your kids. there will be kids who struggle with their sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Believing kids, people, you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a kid struggling with sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying the issue is not to tell them that they're straight. The issue is to remind them of who Jesus is. Listen, if you have a kid who's convinced that their identity is something else, the first conversation you need to have with them is about faith in Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because where are you going to go from there? If they don't have faith in Jesus, and I'm not talking about being convinced they're believers because they said the prayer at a vacation Bible school.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, if their life does not reflect the gospel, the question you need to ask as a parent, because you're concerned about your kid's eternity, is, does my kid know Jesus? That has to be the major thing. And listen, if it means that it's embarrassing for you as a parent because you thought your kid was saved this whole time, but you realize they're not, what you're actually saying is, I care more about me than I do about my kid.
Yeah.
And that's arrogant, and it's cocky, and it's stupid, and you should get kicked in the nuts.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, like, be so concerned about your kid that you say, I want to know about their salvation.
Parenting episode now.
Right now. Yeah. No, but you're completely right.
That's right. No, it's right.
And one of the things that I've been excited about with having young kids, my oldest is 3 years old, and I have
Is she dating?
at this, yes, no, she's not. That's a funny joke. That's why I said yes, but she's not.
Yeah.
Is that you can set that tone and that precedence way early on. Like you're beginning to help shape this understanding of God's design for relationships, the way that God shows his love, the way that God proclaims himself through Christ. Like you're teaching those things. Maybe not, I mean, obviously it's going to look different as they age. Is very, the way that you had mentioned it earlier, Mike, just in regards to having 4 boys that might approach dating differently. It's having the wisdom as a parent. One of the terms that I kind of go throughout my mind is just being intentional in every stage, being intentional. And now with having Riley and Adeline, being intentional with each individual, and they're very young. And a lot of people, I mean, talked about a few weeks ago or last week or whatever about kids stories. People just want to slough off teaching kids, but you're setting this precedence for God and how he works and how he moves and how he's designed things and how he shows his character and his nature and how he shows his love. And with that groundwork laid, hopefully I can get to a point with Riley where it's not starting from scratch. I can begin the conversation with God's love, God's intention, and God's design. And this, now that you're old enough to date or whatever terminology, now that you want to date, that's how that applies to dating. This understanding of, like, you've heard it your whole life. You've heard Christ as core your whole life. Now, how does this apply to each phase of life or each new thing that gets brought up as you're growing and as you're learning? It's not something that's going to cease to be the second you start dating or the second that you make these life changes. And so that not to discourage those people who are listening or watching who currently have teenagers that are trying to figure that out. Obviously, Christ is enough. One thing that we've talked about in life, Jesus is enough. And so if you're beginning that conversation or beginning to set that tone now, that's totally okay. I just think that it's an exciting opportunity for all of us as parents to set the goal rightly, instead of setting a low goal or a low view of God, to set the goal rightly and say, how can we perpetuate a correct idea of what God's design for relationships is in our culture of dating, because the Bible doesn't approach it. Right. So having a proper mindset towards it.
Totally an opinion. I feel very strongly about it, so I will try to keep it tempered. I think it's stupid when people joke, we were joking about it, but I think it's stupid when people ask their 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, do you have a boyfriend at school?
I hate it. Yeah.
Because as we've said, dating is not a biblical construct, but from a Western perspective and from a Christian perspective, dating has as its aim and its intentionality looking forward to marriage, which has as its core the gospel. Super, super important and weighty stuff that we have to take very seriously. And I think when we trivialize it and we start talking to our first graders about, is there a boy at school that you like? Is there a little girl at school that you like? I think we are shaping their view of dating in a horrible way. I think we think it's funny. We think it's joking.
It's usually the people who are like, speaking of country, like I've heard, this is like a little side note, but I've heard women who are married, godly women, talk about country artists as like, no, that's just my boyfriend.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's that same perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not married to him. He's just my like fake boyfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's problematic.
Yeah. It's showing something else is going on. Okay. On that note, just to springboard off that a little bit, I actually don't think it's a good idea for younger teenage girls to be allowed to date as a parent. Here's why. I have been to way too many preteen camps where I'm not joking, especially in my 20s. It doesn't happen anymore because now I'm older than a lot of their parents. But like when I was in my 20s, I would get notes from these girls at preteen camp, 12-year-old girls like romantic
with
notes
little
from
crushes.
them. Yep.
Yeah.
As a parent, you have, to your point about situational, you have to recognize the phases of kids. Girls mature a lot faster than boys.
Yeah.
Probably for eternity.
Yeah.
Boys are going to think farts are funny till they're 95 and dead, and women, you know what I mean? Like there's a maturity level. So a girl's maturing way, way, way earlier than boys are. And there is a natural, when a girl goes through puberty, there is a natural instinct hormonally. She's at a place where she can start bearing children.
Yeah.
So that's a natural instinct. What are you going to do now? You're going to start to instinctively seek that out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think as a parent, I'm saying I do not think it's a good idea for parents to let young girls date, because that's like you're like saying I'm willing to put my girl in a situation where they're going to be in a bad spot
with stupid boys,
with immature boys who.
Well, to your point about the immaturity of men, the joke of here, hold my beer, watch this. It's never a woman saying that. It's always men saying that before they fall off the roof or break their ankle or do whatever, right? Like, I mean, to your point,
which is kind of fun.
There is,
it's so
there is. I saw a video the other day of this lady going, "My husband just has to do these things," and he had installed a slide in their pool, and he climbs up on it and stands up on it like he's going to surf down. And his feet go out from under him, and his back bends over the side of the slide, and he bounces into the pool, and he comes up going, oh, like screaming and stuff, and holding his back and holding his shoulder.
That's so funny.
But
I would totally do it.
You know what I mean?
We I was on a date I had a girlfriend in high school that she invited me to a family event, and she had a bunch of nieces and nephews, and we were all hanging out. I ended up on that side of the table somehow, and I had a blast. But I was hanging out with these kids, and I was like, how many of these salt and pepper shakers can we stack up? And so, like, I'm no joke, like getting all this thing together. And we have, and then a mom looked down the table, and she runs down there, and she goes, whoa, what are you guys doing? I had like plates and silverware and things just balanced up. And
it was you doing
it was me doing
it.
And they looked at me and looked at the kids like, that might not be a good idea right now. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't as good. Started taking it down.
I was a disciple now leader in a home with junior high boys, and they were in their sleeping bags sledding down the stairs.
Yes.
And I was like, have you ever seen somebody just throw themselves down the stairs?
Oh my goodness gracious.
And they're like, no. And I'm like, watch this. And I throw myself down the stairs, and I get so much momentum that at the bottom I roll into the wall, and I push my shoulder and my head through the sheetrock.
Whoops.
That host home never hosted again. Not because of the kids, but because of
you.
the 25-year-old leader.
That's right.
You know?
I think in Pierce, you're going to be in that spot. But like, I think a lot of people don't have the understanding maybe of the danger you're putting your girl into. And I'm saying that as someone who doesn't actually understand girls. I understand at least how girls act. That's what I'm saying. I've been married to one for a while. I'm married one for a while. Yep. Cammie was with me at a preteen camp one time. And
she wanted to slap some of those kids.
Well, yeah, because this girl wrote me a note that said something like, "I'm going to crush Cammie under a rock." They're brutal.
You'll be single then. That's terrifying.
If you as a parent of a young teenage girl don't understand that reality, then someone needs to tell you, because you need to guard. I'm saying against that.
Being intentional with it, with a proper perspective of the gospel in mind, because too often the stuff that's taught is no, dating is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where they want to stop the conversation, because they're uncomfortable with the whole conversation that comes alongside that. There's a story that I've heard where even a dad didn't want to go with his teenage daughter, she was 12 or 13, to go get her ears pierced because he didn't want to accept the fact that she was growing up. And so as minuscule as that sounds, like I feel like that's a predominating mentality, especially with dads and their daughters, is they don't want to accept the fact you'll never date anybody. It's like that type of joke that goes on, right?
Yeah, you can't date till you're 40.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is a fine joke, whatever. But if you're teaching an understanding of the gospel and an understanding of God's design for these types of things, then coming in and being like protecting your daughter from stupid boys, from situations like that is a great thing to establish as a dad and teach along the way.
And not meeting them at the door with the shotgun, as the joke often goes.
Yeah.
Like, I've known guys who have actually done that just to kind of put the fear of God into them. How great would it be like if you invested in this young man?
I was going to say,
exactly.
It seems like the better perspective as a parent of a girl is to paint a picture of what the guy should be like.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Show your wife and your daughter the kind of love.
If you're at home with both parents and you're the father, set an example, like where the girl says, and I think this is probably instinctive, if you are a man of character who loves Jesus, like let that be the barometer for the guy that she marries. Yeah. If you're in a single home without that dad, then as a mom, do your best to paint that picture to your daughter of here's the guy that you want to marry. And to your point, Ryan, when that guy shows up and you're as a parent, if you feel for real, if you feel like you need to show up with a shotgun, he's not the guy.
That's right.
If it's a guy that you feel like this is a good guy, then do everything you can as a parent to like to help that along with that guy. Like, you know what I mean? Like make sure that that's the right guy.
One of the things that Michelle and I pray regularly for our boys' future wives, whoever they are, wherever they are, is that they're in a home where they know what it is to be loved, where they know what it is to know Christ, where they're being shown the love of Christ, but also like, and I've had several dreams in my life where I've had daughters, and at this point, that's probably not going to happen. But I think of my boys' future wives, and I think like we want to be a family to them too. We want to show them the love of Jesus, and so like I think a lot of times as parents, we forget that here's this other young person that's coming into our home to some degree or another, that we have the opportunity to show them the love of Jesus, and help shape for them, because not everybody comes from a home where that was shaped for them or modeled for them. And so we have an opportunity to do that. There are some really good young men and young women, good kids, moral, upright, upstanding, growing in their relationship with Christ, who maybe haven't had that modeled for them. And we have the opportunity to welcome these people into our home and also show not just our kids, but these kids by extension, because if my kid's going to get married one day, I want that marriage to proclaim Jesus. I want that marriage for my boys to be a blessing. I want their family to be a place where it's a bastion of peace and joy, and like to have the opportunity to shape that, because eventually they're going to grow up and be gone, and I don't get to do that. Really quickly.
I don't think that's true, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, I still have the opportunity, but not in the same way as when they're home.
Yeah, and
it changes.
Yes, agreed. I think that here's my take.
Yeah.
I think if you start that relationship now, I think that relationship actually will continue even when they're married.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That's what I mean.
And my experience,
I just don't want people to think like I got to do what I can now so that when they leave, they're on their own.
You're completely right. I'm coming at that from my bias. Like
you didn't have that.
No, when I left home at 20, I was on my own.
Yeah.
From that point forward. But
your boys, because of the way you are with them, they will call you.
Yeah, that's my hope.
They will call you a month into marriage just to tell you how it is.
That's my hope.
They will call you 6 months into marriage when they're like, which way are you supposed to roll the toothpaste up? You know
I know,
what I mean?
yeah. Like I hope that we'll have that relationship for sure. I know that some parents, we talked about this on the parenting episode, but I know that some parents will be like, my aim's not to be your friend, my aim's to be your parent. And my aim's for both. Like I want to love my kids.
And, are those mutually exclusive?
I know.
Yeah, for real.
So one other thing though, because I do bump into a lot of adults who are dating again.
Oh.
Right? I bump into a lot of adults who are dating again.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments that I hear from them, and even Christian ones, is, well, I've had sex, and sex was a part of my marriage before, and so it's okay for us to have sex because I have those desires and I already know what I'm missing. And so, and I just want to say everything we've set up to this point still applies to you.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting here, you've listened this whole time, you're like, hey, none of this applies to me. It all applies to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually think it's worse because you're old enough, mature enough to know going into a relationship probably pretty quickly whether this is someone you can spend the rest of your life with, especially if you've been married before.
Yeah.
You know, so like I'll say this, like if you're single as an adult now and you're dating again and you are having sex quickly, let's just be honest. You didn't start dating because you wanted a relationship. You started dating because you wanted to have sex.
Yeah,
exactly.
So your aim was not to honor Christ.
So like, if you shift your perspective and you begin to have feelings for somebody, then you should know pretty quickly, even without dating them, like if this is probably someone you're going to be married to or not. And I think maybe the wisdom would be, if you're going to date someone as an adult, don't date them for very long.
Yeah.
In fact, don't even be engaged for very long. In fact, I would say, like, if you know this is a person you're going to marry, you're mature enough. Listen, you don't even care anymore about having a big extravagant wedding. Like, if the goal is to honor Jesus in your relationship, and you're like, I haven't had sex in a long time, and I'm ready for this. Okay, props. I'm just going to give props. My boy Dusty, just got married again. Walked through that entire thing. Dating Kimberly, was just telling me, like, dude, I haven't had sex in years. I'm like, I want to have sex with her so bad, which is a phenomenal thing for him to say. People are like freaking out over that. I'm like, like that means
he desires her.
And what he said was, he realized, because he realized he didn't do it right the first time with his first wife, and he was like, this time I want to honor Jesus with this. So he struggled through that their entire relationship, and they honored Jesus sexually beforehand, you know? And so I think that it happens, and they didn't have this like crazy short dating relationship. I mean, I think that was probably like 6 months between when they met and they got married, maybe a little longer, 6 to 9 months, something like that. So like it can happen. Like, so don't tell me you're incapable of it. That's just you copping out because you're not, your heart is more bent on your pleasure than it is the glory of God.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it any different.
Yeah.
Sweet. That was like really harsh. I felt like it got really harsh for a second.
No, I think that's what's the one thing I was going to say earlier about like the whole mentality of God has the one for us. I think one of the biggest issues with dating, may you be in high school, college, may you have gone through a divorce, may you just be never been married and you're in your 30s or whatever. Like one of the biggest issues with dating from our cultural perspective is it's very me centered. And so I think what too often Christians have done is they've taken a very me-centered mentality and they've tried to sprinkle God in the midst of that. Like, well, God has designed one for me, and it's all centered on me. And so when things get hard, and people even apply this towards marriage, when things get hard or difficult, or maybe it's just even tension, like, and it's not suitable to me, then I'm bouncing out. I'm out of here real quick. Instead of having an understanding it's not all about my pleasure. It's not, whatever that looks like, may it be your comfortability, may it be sexuality, may it be whatever. If it's all centered around your pleasure and it's not centered around Christ, then that's not God's design for marriage. It's not God's design for, and we take God's design for marriage and our understanding of that and apply it to our dating relationships. No matter where you are in life, no matter what phase you're in, that is consistent because God designed it for that way. So
I don't know if there's a simpler viewpoint of dating because there's not really a biblical model. I think if you're going to say a simpler viewpoint of dating, maybe it would be like
keep Christ as core.
Or like date with the intention of a marriage, of it leading to a marriage that paints a picture of the relationship of Jesus with the church.
There was two things that we kind of kept coming back to throughout the conversation, and it was God's design for marriage, God's intentionality for marriage, as well as this involves, I think the language you used, Ryan, towards the beginning was it involves another person for whom Christ has died. And so realizing that like this is, again, the whole me-centered thing, doing away with the me-centered stuff and applying a mentality towards dating that you can't 100% say is biblical, but it's taking biblical understandings and God's design for relationships and applying that to the way that our world structures courtship and dating and stuff like that. So an understanding of marriage and an understanding that this isn't just about my pleasure. This is, I have the opportunity now, may you be parents, may you be the person dating, to serve and build up and to encourage another person for whom Christ has died. And then starting off with those same goals and values, and then building upon that in a dating relationship. So two things: God's design for marriage and understanding of the gospel and the other person that's involved in it. I like that. Cool. You guys don't have anything else to add to that? That was a little bit long.
I have a lot, but like,
I like the conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
It was really good.
Thanks, Shelby.
Thanks, Shelby. You know who else I want to thank? Steven. Thank you, Steven, for letting us use this space and your great microphones, and for using your great editing.
And thanks for leaving a remote for Ryan to turn down the AC.
Shut
up. Go follow at The Garden Audio on Instagram. Go see what he's got going on over there. While you're there, follow at Simpler Pod. You'll see clips and memes and stuff going on, but it's also a great place to contact us. The last 2 weeks have been conversations that were recommended to us. So we want to hear you guys' thoughts. We'd love to hear your perspective on dating and how it may have shifted. What kind of how home you grew up in. One of the things that we had talked about a few weeks ago was just the importance of like testimonies and things like that, sharing what God's doing, sharing how God is working, or how God may have changed something from your past to where you are now, just your understanding of it. So if you want to share any stories and you're like, man, I'd love to hear this story shared either through the Simpler social media or through the Simpler podcast, record a video, type it out, do whatever. We'd love to be able to build the Simpler community that way. And as always, keep Christ as core. What could be simpler than that? Catch y'all next week. Bye.